Welcome to the Move podcast, our very first Move show of 2024. We may be a little bit rusty. It's been a little bit of absence from it, but we're happy to be back. And this show, you've got to stick around and listen to the show because I think we're going to spend a big chunk of time talking about one particular rider, 20 years old, who may be the greatest talent we've seen in a couple of years, right? It wasn't that long ago. We were like, who are these new young stars? This show in particular, we're going to share a name with you that we've not talked about before, and we're going to talk about a lot today. Before we get into that with Johan and Spencer, I just want to tell you about a couple of our partners. Now, if you are like me, where it's unseasonably cold, it becomes a savior to ride indoors. And we're so fortunate to have a partnership with Zwift. We have our club rides. We do Wednesday and Suffer Sunday every week. And it's really fun. We do Wednesday. They call it a casual club ride. I'll be honest with you, I struggle to stay in it, but it's a lot of fun. And I've been improving through the winter just by doing it more and more. And it's a great alternative to riding outdoors. If you don't have the equipment you need to ride indoors with a smart trainer, you should check out the Zwift Smart Trainer, the Zwift Hub. It's only $5.99, and you can just get the pre-installed cassette of your choice, and you will also get a 1 year of Zwift with that purchase. So head on over to Zwift.com, grab your Zwift Hub, and don't forget this code for the free shipping, Zwift Hub, ZWIFTHUB, all one word, and get free shipping. Next, one of our other newer partners is Bicycle. I'm going to spell it out for you, so when you type it in, you're going to the right place. It's Buycycle. And this is such a great service, whether you're buying or selling a bike. Go out in your garage and look around. There's probably one or two bikes that you haven't touched in a while. Maybe you should sell it and put it towards the purchase of something that you want on Bicycle. It's really incredible, the service they set up. There's over 20,000 in inventory, over 30 countries, and it's may make it incredibly simple to sell your bike to them. They'll send you the everything you need for shipping. You know, no going down to your local bike shop and digging around in the dumpster for a bike box. They'll send you everything you need and get you all set up to sell your bike. So sell your bikes on Bicycle, Buycycle. Enter this code. Jot this down. We do 24, WEDU 24, and that will remove the seller fee when you want to sell your bike. It's Buycycle.com. All right, guys, we're going to start with this. And again, we're going to get into this new talent that we're going to spend a lot of time talking about. Incredible talent, rising star. But first, let's oh, by the way, I'm joined by Johan Bruyneel and Spencer Martin, and they're going to break down this year's Tour Down Under, first big race of the season, first World Tour race of the season. Let's start with you, Spencer, and let's go through some of the stages quickly, and then we'll go deep on some details.
Yeah, thanks, JB. Well, this will be quick because I will say this was maybe not my favorite route of the Tour Down Under. The first four stages probably just could have been penciled in as sprint stages. The big takeaway from the sprints, Sam Welsford wins stage 1, 3, 4, all bunch sprints. Bora, his Bora team, he's on Bora now, went over from DSM in the offseason. Bora, unbelievably strong. Danny Van Poppel, his leadout rider. Johan teased in the pre-show that he's now the best, undisputed best leadout rider in the world. I would tend to agree. So we don't really need to go deep on those other than Sam Welsford, massive rider, like 80 kilos, riding a 56 tooth chainring, just absolutely like you could see the power oozing off of him, riding people off of his wheel. The only thing that disturbed that was stage 2, Isaac del Toro, the new signing. I believe he's 20 years old. First year professional, first professional race, second race he's ever done at the professional level, attacks off a full lead out from Israel Premier Tech, steals stage 2. Just absolutely, it was unbelievable. I couldn't believe the amount of power he must have been putting off. You could just see it through the screen. And then the weekend came around. We had stage 5 and 6, two a little bit more interesting stages. Stage 5 finished up Wollonga Hill. That's the famous summit finish they have at the Tour Down Under. I believe it's in here every year. Oscar Onley from DSM won that. You might be asking, who's that? He's 21 years old on DSM, his first professional win as well. Stephen Williams he is on Israel Premier Tech this year. Did a really good job of finishing second. Big takeaways from that is Jayco kind of imploded on the climb, maybe blew up Simon Yates. Simon Yates just really not strong enough to stay in the front group. So he loses time, kind of falls out of the GC. Next stage 6, and also Julian Alaphilippe was up there on stage 5. Isaac del Toro also finishes up towards the front. So those were two names that I thought I'd call out. Stage 6, finished on Mount Lofty. Another one of these South Australian, fast summit finishes. Like, they are climbs, but they're not ridden at the same pace as a European climb. These guys are flying up these things because they're short enough, shallow enough for them to almost turn them into reduced bunch sprints. And that's exactly what Stephen Williams did. Isaac del Toro did a great job to attack to try to get back into the GC lead. Stephen Williams was right on his wheel and then kind of expertly finished off the win to seal the overall. Oscar Onley, who won the day before, was distanced, fell out of the top 3. So it was Stephen Williams, Jonathan Navarez, and Isaac del Toro on the podium. We'll talk a little bit about Navarez he's on Ineos. He won a stage at the Giro a few years ago. I was kind of unaware that he was such a good, he was a really good sprinter in the opening, both criterium and then throughout this race. Good sprinter, good climber. I'm curious to ask you guys why you think he hasn't shown more in bigger races, but the Tour Down Under is a funny balance between, we say like Simon Yates wasn't up to snuff, Jayco, bad race, but there's a balance where you don't want to be too good because we are so early in the season. Riders who win here actually don't tend to win that much the rest of the year. So there's an inverse correlation between really being fit here and being fit 6 months later in the meat of the season. So you have to walk a fine line. And so it's hard to pull out. You don't want to extrapolate too much from this, but there are some little hints you can pull out, like Isaac del Toro obviously looked amazing. I think great things to come. And then Johan pulled out another one, Bart Lemon on Team Visma. I guess it's Visma Lisa bike this year. 28-year-old rider, but only in his second year as a full-time pro, doing incredibly well. I believe he got 5th and 4th in the last 2 summit finishes. So you can extrapolate some things out from here, but you don't want to get locked into too many declarative statements like Sam Welsford's the best sprinter in the world. And let's just start right there, Johan. What should we read into these sprint performances from both him and Bora?
Well, as you said, Spencer, by the way, I think we can finish the podcast because you basically said everything I want to say already, but
no, we've got more in store for you.
No, it's like you said, Spencer, Tour Down Under, it's the first World Tour race. But in the big scheme of on the agenda of all the big teams, it is not a big thing. I would actually say, if they would let the freedom for the teams to decide, they wouldn't go to the Tour Down Under because yes, it's an important race, but all the logistical hassle that comes with it is a nightmare for teams. You have to most of the teams that are actually going to the riders that go to Tour Down Under are not able to attend the early training camp of the team. You have to go there, at least 10 days on beforehand to adjust to the time difference, to the heat, and then on the way back you have the same problem. So it's a race where I would say a lot of teams and a lot of riders go there to basically get the engine going. And, it's not such a big deal. It's you can see from my experience from when I was there, it's all the teams are in the same hotel. It's a very relaxed atmosphere, fun, guys are joking. There's no stress. It's not a high tension race. Now, if you know that on beforehand, you can clearly see that there are some riders and some teams who take advantage of that, which is very smart. In the case of Israel Premier Tech, for example, Steve Williams, good rider, but until now he has never shown that he was at the level to win a big World Tour race. I think he was on Bahrain before this year, a few years, and he won a stage in the Tour of Switzerland one time. Other than that, he's a good rider, but he's never performed at this level. Like, and if you see, he was up there, takes the jersey, and then with the leader's jersey wins the last stage. That's being dominant. That's like, okay, this is my race and nobody's going to take this away from me. And so we have never seen that. So it's clear that both him and the rest of his team have prepared Tour Down Under very, very specifically and targeted this race to win. Then, obviously Sam Welsford, the same thing. He's, you could say he's the best sprinter. Well, he's not. He's a good sprinter, but, first of all, the best sprinters were not here. And then on top of that, I would want to bet money that on the fact that he has prepared specifically for this race, being an Australian, having spent the whole winter in Australia, and on top of that, the race passed through his home region. On top of that was his birthday. So, this was a goal for him. And he did really well. I mean, winning 3 stages, 3 World Tour stages. That's, there's a lot of riders who will not get to that number at the end of the season. So, the guys who really target this race, I would say, well done. But as you say, we cannot take any conclusions out of the results of this race.
Yeah, even when we talk about Sam Welsford being so dominant, you look at 2 of the other sprinters who are right up there, who used to be dominant. Caleb Ewan, who still has question marks, right? And then Guilherme, who looks to be on the comeback trail from injury. But
I think Guilherme,
neither one of those are on top form, right?
Well, I mean, Guilherme, I think it's good to see him back there. He struggled last year. I mean, he had, he was struggling at the beginning of the year. Then he had a few crashes. Obviously, there was a lot of pressure on him because he had such an amazing season in 2022. But yeah, I think it's good to see him back. He's the case of Caleb Ewan. It's a bit of an unknown. There was some rumors before the Tour Down Under that he was sick. They didn't start him in the criterium, which is ideal for him. It's an ideal race, so they didn't start him there. So obviously he was not feeling well. So we don't know if that had an impact on his performances. But I think it's safe to say that Jayco-Alula were expecting a lot more from the whole race, but also a lot more from Caleb Ewan. And he has not been ever, and in any stage, he had not even come close to winning. He was trying to find his position. And then the one time he kind of had his position, he wasn't fast enough. So comes off a difficult season, after all his problems with Lotto Destiny. So I think we should still give him the benefit of the doubt. But I think for Caleb Ewan, the same situation is like for a lot of other guys. On the one hand, they're still young, 27, 28, 29, but at the same time, these young guys keep coming from everywhere. And before you know it, you're an old guy and you're not in the game anymore. So, hopefully for Caleb Ewan, this is not the case, but it's not a good start for him.
Yeah, and from Biniam Girmay, like I saw exactly what I wanted to see from him. I think we should just mention these are not good stages for a guy like him. Like, let's just look at stage 4. He gets second behind Welsford, the only rider not to get dropped when Welsford was sprinting. That's how hard Welsford was going. But it was 2 hours and 59 minutes. Not a lot of climbing. Like, that's not where Girmay shines. That's actually where someone like Sam Welsford, a former trackie, big guy, 80 kilos, pushing a massive gear. All these finishes were kind of uphill. So it was just like tailor-made for Welsford. I saw what I needed from Girmay. Great progress from him. I think he's going to be back to his best in 2024. The Ewan stuff, and I just said we don't want to make declarative statements based on this race. That was a little concerning to me. Like stage 3 on the hoods, on the hoods in the saddle in the sprint. That tells me that he just doesn't feel confident that he can find the positioning he needs. He's been suffering from this for 2 years at this point. Last year is at this race, if you remember, with the Uni-SA, it's like the University of South Australia team. So you'd excuse him for not being in position. Like, well, he doesn't have his normal team. He's with, guys he doesn't normally ride with. He's here with Jayco, who in theory should have the ability to position him. And he just was out of position almost every day. Like, that's concerning to me. And, maybe he'll have a great comeback later in the year, but that was something that I noticed, that probably my biggest takeaway from these sprint stages was just him not being able to even be in position to contest the sprints.
Yeah. And another thing, I mean, now that we're talking about Caleb Ewan, the whole team, Jayco-Alula, big disappointment. I think the biggest disappointment of the race. I saw an interview of Luke Plapp, who, by the way, crashed on stage 3, had to abandon. And, with him, it would probably have been a different story because he was their guy. He was the strong guy. He was super dominant in the Australian Championships. Obviously, looking at his statements and his interviews, he was, his morale was sky high. But, he said, well, basically, we're here to win every stage and the whole thing. And, finally, they go home with no victories. And their first guy, Simon Yates, is the 7th. So that's obviously not a good result for Jayco-Alula in their home race. So I think that they're going to be disappointed. In their favor, of course, they have had the bad luck with Luke Plapp, but obviously not a good start for them.
Before we move too far away from talking about the sprinting, you got to add to it that the lead out that Welsford had was pretty interesting every time.
Yeah, Danny van Poppel has become, I think, he last year he did it with who was it, with the Irish guy? Forgot his name.
Bennett.
Sam Bennett. Yeah, Sam Bennett. Sam Bennett was not in the best shape. But he has become, in my opinion, the best. He's like a Morkov, I think he's better than Morkov. He's faster, and once he gets a free line, there's no stopping him. Sometimes there will be stages that, because Van Poppel, once he gets that, there will be stages where his sprinter won't be able to come around him. That's a prediction I'm making for this year.
He'll get a win as a lead out.
Yeah, I think he had a funny quote. It wasn't that funny, but after the first stage, he was like, "Yeah, it's like nice to be sprinting or leading out like a good sprinter finally." Like, oh my god, like don't ever leave Bora. They'll roast you in the press. But Johan, do you think? I agree. Van Poppel, the best lead out rider in the world, is.
Well, he has a great DNA. I mean, his father Jean-Paul Van Poppel was, in the late 80s, beginning 90s, he was the fastest sprinter in the world too. Won a lot of Tour de France stages, and so he has that going for him.
And his brother beat Mark Cavendish at a Tour of Missouri stage that I was at, and I was like, "Oh wow, this guy's going to be the next great sprinter." And then I think that's maybe the last race that he won.
Yeah, well, DNA doesn't always work for both. That's not fair. I mean, you have the same with Mathieu van der Poel and his brother. One guy's a superstar, and the other guy is okay. So,
I mean, just to have a career as a pro, though, is pretty impressive. But is Welsford their best sprinter? Is he the best sprinter on that team? I mean, it's kind of funny because Jordi Meus, is that how you'd say his name? Like, he's the Tour de France stage winning sprinter on that team. Like, what are they going to do later in the real European summer?
Well, I don't think they're not the same kind of sprinters. I think Jordi Meus is, he's super tall. Difficult to lead him out because, the drafting is not going to be tremendous for him. So he kind of has to, go off other wheels. But they're two different types of sprinters, in my opinion. Jordi Meus is strong, like, when the race has been hard and when it's probably when it's a slower sprint that he's, in my opinion, Welsford is a pure sprinter. He's like a, ball of fire,
I've actually spent, this won't surprise you guys, the last 2 weeks going back through every Grand Tour stage of the last few years. And something I've noticed.
We are not surprised.
Sprinters they're shrinking. Like, it's fashionable in Australia. If you're out in Melbourne on a group ride, you'd say, Welsford's the best Australian sprinter. He's better than Caden Groves. But you get to these Grand Tours and the sprinters are much smaller. Like Jasper Philipsen, not a big guy, but he's not winning because he's faster or more powerful. He's winning because he's less tired and less fatigued, because these stages are so hard. By the time he gets to the sprint, he can be faster because he's just a fitter, more complete rider. It kind of makes me wonder about this. Like, we're almost seeing a bifurcation of these really powerful guys, and then they go to the Tour and they're not able to, or even the Vuelta or the Giro, they're not able to really replicate that success.
Different game, Spencer. Different game. Let's we come back to the same. Let's not compare the Tour Down Under, where the stages are 120, 130, 140K, not super hard. And, probably, the 80% of the peloton is not there super focused, which is completely different in the big races in Europe.
Can we unpack Luke Plapp's statement for a second? I mean, I think he probably wins this race overall if he doesn't crash. He was absolutely flying. But his team won two races this weekend. They just were on a different continent. They were in Europe with Dylan Groenewegen and Michael Matthews winning Spanish races on Saturday and Sunday. I would say they did not send their best team to this race. Is this strategic by them or? No,
I think they did. I think that, obviously, I think their big focus was to win the Tour Down Under. If you want to win the Tour Down Under, you're not going to focus on the sprinters. That's why they put Caleb Ewan, who's not their best sprinter for the moment, to be fair. They were focused. I mean, they had Luke Plapp, they had Simon Yates, and they had Chris Harper, which, are three guys who could, in theory, have won it. But, seeing Luke Plapp's form, his dominance in the Australian Championships, his motivation, I think that was their big leader. Bad crash in stage 3, so everything changed. That's how cycling goes. It's unfortunate because Luke Plapp did a big move. He left Ineos. If I'm not mistaken, he still had a year on his contract, and he left to Jayco to be the leader there. And so, his first big goal was to win Tour Down Under. You're right. I think he would have probably won it.
What were we saw a lot of missing skin from his crash, but what were the injuries? Did we get an update? Looking at the rest of his season.
No, there's nothing broken. There's nothing broken, but if you
was bad
crash like that, and even if there's, even if it's just superficial, I mean, the night he probably had a super bad night. Your body reacts. You can get a little fever. They pulled him out of the race. He actually didn't abandon. They pulled him out of the race, right? So I think that was a smart decision. Tough decision to make.
Definitely. This is like my pet theory that road rash is the most underrated injury in cycling because your body has to regrow skin, which is very hard for it to do. So if you try to fight through, if you crash really hard, like if you pull a Roglic and you're a mummy, you can be okay for a day or two, and then you start to just decline, and you can put yourself in a deep hole trying to train and race through that. So I think it's smart what they did. It's probably early enough in the year he can recover. I think this normally could be tough, but we're so early, and he has so much time to recover. I hope he's fine because it's, that was like the best I've seen him in years was the last few weeks.
Yeah, and super confident. We saw a few attacks from him. And he was, Narvaez finishes he finishes second in GC.
Second in GC.
Yeah, and Luke Plapp had him on the ropes in that one stage where he attacked. And so Narvaez, talking about him, it's you asked, okay, why didn't he win any big races yet? I think Narvaez is one of those riders. He is very he can do different things. He's fast. He won that crit.
Yeah.
Just before the Tour Down Under. He's pretty good uphill as long as it's not real big climbs. And most importantly, I've seen this guy do things in the Belgian classics, with short cobbled uphills that, that guy's strong. Like that's, in my opinion, that's like his specialty, the spring classics. I do remember that last year he had a crash in one of the races, probably Waregem or Harelbeke, and he broke his collarbone. So that's probably why we didn't see much of him last year. But the guy is super talented. In the spring, we're going to see him. We're going to see him up there. He's not afraid to fight for position. One of those other things, like new things in cycling. Who would have thought that, a South American would have been up there, rubbing shoulders with in the spring classics with all these big guys like Van Aert and Van der Poel. And he's one of those guys. He's pretty good.
He's probably the type of guy too, who I don't want to be unkind to Ineos, but just goes to Ineos and like gets stuck. Not a super talent. Like even someone like Luke Plapp kind of got. It's like, what is he? We don't know what to do with him. He's always kind of stuck behind their GC ambitions. Maybe doesn't get fostered in the way he should in the Cobbled Classics. But yeah, I had no idea he was this fast in the sprints. I mean, he looked incredible.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, before we get into talking about this rising star, which we're going to spend some time on, I want to tell you about a couple of our other partners. We appreciate their support of this show. Taking care of your health isn't always easy, but it should be, and it should be simple. And for the last couple of years, I've been drinking AG1 every day, as everyone on this team pretty much has. No exceptions, 1 scoop mixed in water once a day, every day. It makes me feel, more energized throughout the day. It's just a great little additive, tastes great, easy to mix up. I carry these little packets with me everywhere I go. If I'm traveling, makes it super, super simple. If there's one product I had to recommend to elevate your health, it's AG1. That's why we've partnered with them for so long. If you want to take ownership of your health, start with AG1. Try AG1 to get your free 1-year supply of vitamin D3 plus K2 and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase exclusively at drinkag1.com/themove. That's drinkag1.com/themove. Next, I want to tell you about another thing that's part of my daily routine, and that is Ketone IQ. I love getting my ketones in all the time. And then, of course, a lot of those guys, Lance, George, you guys are all, at some point an elite athlete. So you probably measure a lot of things on what it does for you physically. I will tell you, since I've been taking ketones from HVMN, is it just has helped with mental clarity day in, day out. Not going to lie. I stopped taking Adderall a year ago. I can attribute taking Ketone IQ to helping me get through the day the way I used to. It's a much better alternative. And it's just helped me physically too. I'm sure I'm getting a bunch of physical benefits. And the best way to tackle it, honestly, is to subscribe. I always tell people, get like a 3-month subscription of it and take it. And I can pretty much guarantee you're going to feel better in some capacity, physically, mentally, probably both. You can save 30% off your first subscription order of Ketone IQ at hvmn.com/themove. Again, visit hvmn.com/themove and subscribe upon checkout for 30% off. And last but not least, I'd want to tell you about Helix Sleep. You got to get a good night's sleep. You guys talk about the importance of sleep for athletes. Of course, that applies to everybody. And how long have you had your mattress? You probably had it way longer than you should have. In fact, when Helix sent us a new mattress, we went in and did the sleep study. They tailor-made it for us. And our old mattress wasn't that old. And it was supposed to be the premier brand when we bought it just a couple of years before. Much better sleep on the Helix mattress, a much, much better sleep. So if you've been not sleeping well, been on your old mattress too long, time to make a change. Helix Sleep is offering up to 20% off on all mattress orders and 2 free pillows for our listeners. Go to helixsleep.com/themove. And this is their best offer yet, and it won't last long. With Helix Sleep, better sleep starts now. All right, now we're going to jump into something that I've just been, since stage 2, I've been dying to talk about this. I know you guys are excited about this young rider, only 20 years old, pulls off the stage win, which Spencer already mentioned, Del Toro from Team UAE. Where do we start with this kid? A freak talent.
Yeah, well, I mean, I remember we were last year, the Tour de l'Avenir. We had Mathieu Riccitello in the yellow, and it looked like he was going to win Tour de l'Avenir. And then, I remember on the group chat, people were, hey, what about this Mexican guy? I said, Mathieu has this, And then, the second, I think the second last stage, Riccitello and Del Toro go to the finish together. Real mountain stages, by the way, big mountain stages, nothing like Tour Down Under, like real mountains. So Del Toro stays with Riccitello, beats him in the sprint, but they come in together. And then the last stage, basically, he destroyed the race and won the overall, which, you know, as a Mexican rider is already a sensation in itself. Then you go back a little bit, you know, he was racing on a Mexican team, and also this team has I think it's called AR Monex or something. They also have some like a subsidiary in Italy. So the guy raced a bit in Italy. But from there you can see, I mean, this guy's the real deal. I mean, if you go off what you see in the Tour de l'Avenir, you say the guy's a climber. The guy's a pure climber, because the two last stages were for climbers. There were only climbers there, and he dominated those two stages. And then to see that, you know, he's the first of all, he was third in the prologue of Tour Down Under in the crit as a climber. That's not bad. But the way he won stage 2 was amazing, because, you know, and as Spencer said, you know, and it's been a very long time since I've seen a rider attack in the last kilometer when the peloton is going full speed with, you know, several sprint trains of teams already going 50, 55 kilometers per hour. A guy who just goes. I mean, and for those who have seen the footage, you know, if you look at the helicopter view, the way he goes was just incredible.
I'm glad you brought that up. That helicopter view of Del Toro looked like Pogacar to me. The way he sits on the bike, the shoulders in, he kind of has the handlebars very similar.
He's taller. He's tall. He's quite a bit taller.
And the way he swayed the bike, I was just like, wait, Pogacar's not in this race. but there's some similarities.
Yeah. I mean, if you're a new guy, 20 years old, you know, they keep coming. It's amazing, but, you know, to be in your first race, okay, let's say again, you know, it is only the Tour Down Under, but this is, for this guy, the biggest race he's ever done, right? I mean, and at the end of the day, he is racing against World Tour riders, and some of them are top level World Tour riders. You know, to pull that off, that's already amazing. But then to stay up there on Willunga and the last stage, which, you know, two hard stages, not climber stages, but, you know, I mean, he stayed up there. He lost his jersey on stage 5, but he only lost 5 seconds. And then yesterday he was third in the stage again. So I think he probably lost the Tour Down Under because of a lack of experience and probably, you know, not being able to be patient enough. And then he probably still would have lost a bit the bonifications or something. But still, I mean, to be up there in your first race against guys who, you know, I mean, for sure, Steve Williams and Narvaez have prepared this race full gas. You could say also, you know, a 20-year-old has probably also prepared the season full gas because, you know, he's dying to race and, you know, but still, I mean, really impressive. And I would like to say one thing. You know, one of our, I spent a day a few weeks ago with, you know, one of our future guests for the Move Legends. I'm not going to give away his name, but I could say he's probably one of the 3 best riders in history of cycling. And so he was our guest for one of the episodes. And after the podcast, we had lunch, and he told me, he started to talk about this Isaac del Toro. He said, look at this guy, you know, because the Tour de l'Avenir, I was there last year and I saw him, and this guy is special. And 1 week later, he wins his first race in his first race in the World Tour. So yeah, that was I remembered his words when I saw his victory.
Well, what I like about Del Toro is, JB, you're right. He kind of has this, it's unorthodox lean. Like, it's not how you would teach it, but worked for Pogacar. The bike's moving all over the place. He just seems like an uncut gem almost. Like the guy, you know, there's young riders like Udo Brooks, who just everything is perfectly planned out. He knows exactly what he's doing. He's dialed in. Del Toro seems like someone who's like still has room to improve. And when we go back to that stage 2 performance, I just want to put this into context. So context, Luke Plapp attacks with, like, let's say 8K to go, goes with Narvaez for some reason, attacks him. I'm not quite sure why you would attack someone who's working with you when you're off the front, but they can't get away from the peloton. It's that fast. Then Quinn Simmons attacks with another rider. Quinn Simmons, pretty good rider. You would say, like, a lot of raw power coming off that guy. And he's dangling out in front of the peloton as they come into the last K. Del Toro goes, and he goes so hard that it looked like Quinn Simmons was stuck in mud when he came by him. Like, he went by them so fast and made that move look like, oh, like, that's a cute little move. And you would say that's, like, normally one of the strongest moves in the race. Like, Quinn Simmons with one of the rider just, like, digging deep off the front. And it was unbelievable how fast he went through that final kilometer. Kind of comes over casually. There's a sprint finish happening behind him with, like, a pretty clean lead out from Israel Premier Tech, who, as Johan said, was targeting this race and just kind of, like, nonchalantly wins the stage. It was really impressive. Stage 5, I mean, you're right. He probably lost this race because of inexperience. I don't want to, like, rake UAE over the coals because this is Tour Down Under, but it was a sloppy lead into the climb. Like, they had riders all throughout the peloton. They had one guy in front of Del Toro. Finn Fisher Black was behind Del Toro. He probably should have been in front of him, helping him, not be in the wind. I don't quite understand what happened there. And then Del Toro kind of got pushed pretty far back right when the climb started. He had to work his way back up. You could say that maybe contributed to him being tailed off on, the final sprint of Wollonga. It probably loses it anyway due to bonification, though, because Williams is just such a fast sprinter.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to add something about Del Toro because I think this came up on just our team meeting this past week. You may recall, Spencer, but he's from Ensenada, which is not far from the U.S. border. Because quite often you're like, why are there not more Mexican riders that are at a high level? But maybe he was coming into the U.S. and racing quite often. It may have been very convenient. Do you know more about that?
I don't think so, JB. Sorry, Spencer, if you had some. But what I would say is, he was part of this Mexican under 23 team, which, since last year I've started to follow them a little bit, and these guys are doing a great job for the young riders. I saw their testing facilities, and they have a women's team also. I think he owes everything to that team. As you said before, Spencer, the Mexican Federation is probably suspended or something, or
like I don't have a license to operate or something.
It definitely doesn't come from the grassroots program in Mexico, and I think that's probably why we don't see more Mexican riders. I mean, we have to think back to Raul Alcala in the early 90s to have. Like a top level Mexican rider. Alcala was probably, he's super talented. He was super talented. He was probably talented enough to win the Tour de France. This rider, Alcala, probably maybe not professional enough in the beginning. But yeah, I mean, there must be something there that doesn't work in Mexico because it's a huge country. They have
good terrain, good weather.
They have bike races, so I think his development is purely due to this Mexican team who are doing an amazing job, actually.
Yeah, and I think he's from Ensenada, which I heard has good riding, so probably good riding locally. A great climate. It's not very far from San Diego. And then, as Johan said, I mean, this team. I'm looking at his results now from the last few years. Raced a lot in Europe. I mean, that's the key. Getting those guys to Italy is like the best move they ever made. I think people don't want to hear it, but that's the best way to develop as a young rider, to get to Europe as young as you can and race as much as you can over there. And then it's really just a test of can you acclimate to the culture and be comfortable there? I mean, this is a different podcast, but yeah, Mexico, like, I don't understand why their soccer team isn't better. Everyone plays soccer. I believe it's the largest Spanish-speaking country in the world, unless I'm missing something. And, they're just like Argentina, fraction of the population is much better. So there's some inefficiency in the youth sports development complex down there. Yeah.
The name of the team, by the way, is AR Monex Pro Cycling Team, for people who want to look it up.
So what does the season look like for a rider like this? I mean, he's got to get the experience. I mean, he's new. He's on. Will he be supporting Pogacar, or is he just kind of move around and get experience this year?
No, for sure not a Grand Tour. I mean, maybe the Vuelta at the end of the season, but that's, I don't think so. I wouldn't put him in a Grand Tour yet. Although, what the hell do I know? I mean, the new young riders nowadays, it's a different game, But I think he's gonna do some, like some races, like secondary races, and then probably once in a while a World Tour race, but without any pressure. I would do that. I mean, for him, riding with Pogacar on one of those races would not be bad. So you have a taste of what it is to be with a top, like the best rider in the world, and what it is to because the team functions completely different. Even if it's the same UAE team, the way UAE team rode in Tour Down Under and the way UAE team will ride when they're in the races with Pogacar is a completely different way of racing. So I would let him do one of those races. I mean, he can do a good job. But I think they're, at this point, they probably don't know what his limit is, and they want to just expose him to different experiences. Maybe a race in the Spring Classics. Who knows? Why not? I think he still has to find out where his strengths are. We already know he can climb, and we already know he can sprint. So,
Hey, you know what race would be perfect for him? And what Pogacar did in his same 20-year-old season was Tour California. Like, it's a shame that's not around anymore, but that's Pogacar wins that. Then, as you say, Johan, he goes to the Vuelta at the very end of the year and gets third at the Vuelta, and then it's off to the races from there. But yeah, I mean, really this year, I hope they don't push him too hard. They probably won't. But
They won't. I mean, they have a lot of riders, Plus, I mean, I've seen, what's interesting, nowadays in cycling, Spencer, is that, all these teams who have a development team are actually able to use some of those riders in secondary races. For example, there's a guy who was last year on my son's team here in Madrid. He's now 18, and he was the best junior in Spain. He won the Nations Cup here, and he signed for this Gen Z UAE team, which is their development team. But he already raced yesterday with the professionals in Valencia. So they can switch them. They can bring them over from the development team and put them in races, and then they go back to the young team.
Oh, so he raced as UAE.
The team UAE's Gen Z. That's like a subsidiary they have. Mm-hmm. But they can use those riders in the non-World Tour races now and then.
Okay, yeah. I was wondering how this works. So as long as it's not World Tour, they can.
Yes, yeah.
Interesting. And I mean, the thing about Del Toro, he's lucky he's Mexican, because if he was American, the dreaded headline would be out by now. Is he the next Lance Armstrong? As soon as that is written about you as an American rider.
But it's the same for Del Toro. It's for sure. Is this the next Raul Alcalá? The pressure in Mexico is going to be huge. Also, the thing is, there's probably, the cycling culture in Mexico is probably not that big. So but the guy's already going to he's already going to be a hero in Mexico for sure. Last year already, after winning the Tour de l'Avenir, he was already a hero.
All right. Any other things? I know you should see the notes that Spencer sends over from the Tour Down Under. It's mind-boggling. I don't want to cut you off. If there's anything else that you wanted to touch on before we, I know we want to talk about the cross racing that's been going on. We'll hold on to that for a second. I don't want to cut you off if there's anything else.
I'm now getting our pre-show and our show confused, but we should say, like Johan touched on it, Israel specifically trained for this race. It's smart because they want to be back in the World Tour when the books open back up and it's at the end of the 2025 season. Like, this race might not matter, as much because of the timing and whatnot. It's a far-flung race, but it's still World Tour UCI points on offer. So it's a very smart decision if you're a team like Israel to do that. I just wanted to call that out, that's like a very smart thing for them to do. You should be, if you want UCI points, you should be stacking them up this time of year. Totally makes sense what they did. And also, Spencer,
another thing to add is that, even smarter, knowing that your competitor to be back in the World Tour, Lotto Destiny, decided to not go to this race.
Yep.
So,
I think you, and maybe it was in your notes, but you made a comparison. As far as UCI points, Tour Down Under is equivalent to what? You might be surprised.
Dauphiné Libéré.
Right. That's a big one, right?
Huge race. Yeah.
I mean, Dauphiné now. It's not the Dauphiné Libéré anymore, the Dauphiné. Dauphiné Libéré is the name of the newspaper that used to organize it.
And then did you want to get this? I don't want to get us too into the weeds, but Johan has some thoughts on what the situation that Israel Premier Tech is in is very unique. And I had not heard anyone talk about this yet.
No, I thought it was unique too.
This is probably also one of the reasons why they have gone so hard for Tour Down Under, because the month of February in cycling is very special. There's no World Tour races. So organizers are basically in a great position because all the teams want to race. All the teams want to race, and there's just not enough races. And so the organizers are not obligated to take any of the teams. They can choose. They can pick and choose. So because of the horrible things that are going on in the world, some of the organizers have decided to not invite the team Israel Premier Tech. They have basically no invitations until the end of February. So this is another reason, that they focused so much on given, there's less points in the other races in February, but this is definitely another reason why they focused so hard on Tour Down Under.
So
they have automatic invites to a World Tour race. They're automatic.
Yes, because they were second. They were second in the World Tour and the World Teams classification, is the second division last year. So first and second position have automatic invites to the World Tour races.
It's like it's an irony where you're not World Tour. You can go to World Tour races, but then you can have a hard time getting invited to non-World Tour races, which is really the way you rack up points to get back into the World Tour. Yeah. So it's a tough situation they're in. Which shines light on why they were so focused on this race.
A team that starts a season off like from the gun really well, it sets the tone for, the atmosphere. Once you have that first win, you can be racing well as a team and, just keep chasing that first win and it doesn't come. And everybody becomes desperate. It brings a lot of tranquility to the team having those first wins and say, okay, you know what? The pressure's off, let's just keep doing what we're doing. But because once you start to get desperate for that first win, you start to make mistakes because you're racing too nervously. And this is obviously a benefit of having such a great start of the season for Israel Premier Tech.
All right. Well, we'll wrap this up. I know we want to touch on the cross season.
There's one more thing. There's one more thing I would like to talk about. Yeah. Something that probably it doesn't make a lot of noise, but if you look at this picture here behind me, you have Stevie Williams who's winning the last stage in the leader's jersey, and then you have this rider there from Visma Lease a Bike, Bart Lemon, probably a guy that nobody ever heard of, 28 years old, and I want to specifically spend a bit of time on him because I think it's a very unique story. We have this, this trend of all these young talents coming up, but here we have a different story. This guy last year, he was on human powered health in season 2023. And it was his first year as a full-time professional. The guy was, until last year, he was a colonel in the Royal Dutch Air Force. And so 2022, he was racing on a small Dutch team. He was combining cycling with his full-time job. Last year, started to be a full-time pro. I checked his results. They're not impressive, but obviously the performance staff of the team, Visma, has seen something in this guy. And, to be up there in your first big race without too much experience in racing, actually, tells me that this guy has a big potential. I think it's a unique story, so coming so late to the scene at 28 years old and be up there. He was fourth and fifth in the two hardest stages which was, I was looking, I who's this? I mean, never. And then I checked his name and checked his story. I think it's these guys have looked for something and they've seen something in his power or whatever. I don't know what it is that, made the decision to sign him. And they were right. I mean, he's up there with the big guys. So chapeau.
It's kind of reminds me of when we talked a lot about Roglic. When he came on form, we kept going, have we seen the best yet? Because they came to the sport late. This could be very similar.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned that, JB. It highlights the irony of the sport where these guys should be being discovered by small teams who can't afford big stars, but they're being discovered by the best team in the sport who has the know-how and the resources to identify them. And just the way they think allows them to think, is this pilot, maybe this 27-year-old pilot, maybe a guy we need to sign? Most teams wouldn't think that. That would not be a normal train of thought you would have at a pro team, but it's allowing them to scoop up these really good talents that other people aren't seeing. But, if you're Astana, you should have signed Bart Lemon because that's the type of rider you need to start generating results for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if you're so successful that as Jumbo Visma last year, Visma leased a bike this year, you can also take the liberty to say, okay, let's just do it. And, if it doesn't work out, no big deal. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And
I guess if he's powerful, and if he has power, you could at least, as you said, use him in the first 100K.
Yeah, but there are certain decisions being made. I mean, we talked about it in the pre-show, Spencer. They signed another rider, Julien Vermote, who's already a very experienced rider, has been on different teams. He's been on Quick Step in the past. He's been on Cofidis. He's been on Alpecin, and then didn't find a team last year. Sat out the whole year. He was racing in Belgium individually with a private sponsor, just only small races. And this year he was looking for a team. He send out his resume to different teams, and surprisingly, Visma signed him. Visma signed him for one specific reason. They said, okay, this is a guy that we can use for the first 100 and 120 kilometers in the race to do a specific job. This is like a Moneyball type of signing. This is something that we need specifically for this job. And so cycling has changed in that point of view also, that, they're starting to really look for riders for very specific tasks. And I'm pretty sure that Vermote is going to do a great job at that.
Yeah. And it's funny, you say he was racing these small races. People must be thinking, oh, this guy was dominating. He must have won everything. Now, if you go to his Pro Cycling Stats page, it's all these national level races, which are the lowest level pro race you can be. He won one of them last year. So Visma's really going through this with a fine tooth comb. Yeah. And as you say, it is Moneyball thinking that other teams should be thinking this way of can this guy perform a specific job for us, and not just, does he win? Does he not win? Stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting thought. Someone who works for the first half of a race and then you don't see him, perhaps. That's interesting. Yeah. I know you guys wanted to touch on the cross season. I have not been as glued to it as I was last year, because it's been, from what I understand, it's just been the Vanderpool show all season, right? And then, Spencer, I think you said before the show, this last cross race this weekend was one of the best you've seen.
Yeah, the irony of this is everything we just talked about. We just talked for an hour about a race, the World Tour kickoff race. The irony is the best riders in the world are racing on a different continent, on a different day, doing a different type of race. And that was today's Cyclocross World Cup in Spain, which is really unusual.
Benidorm, which, it's not a real cyclocross race. It's, it's hot, it's dry, it's super fast. It was spectacular. And on top of that, it is right in the middle of where all the teams are having their training camps. Yeah, I mean, Van der Poel actually lives there now. I mean, he lives in a little town, actually, the same little town where I used to live when I was a pro. He bought a house there. Van Aert was there on training camp. So Pidcock was probably there also on training camp. So, yeah, I mean, it was the most interesting cyclocross we've seen so far, because, Van der Poel was, first of all, he was in the back because of a bad start or something he happened in the start. And then we have Van Aert, who was on an amazing level compared to all the other cyclocross races he's done. So it was, and finally, for our listeners or viewers, Wout van Aert took the victory. So first time in 11 races that Mathieu van der Poel didn't win. His dad, by the way, I spent some time with him at the cyclocross in Belgium in Hager, and he said, he's very strong. He says, without any incident or sickness or bad luck, I see him capable of winning all 14 races. It's not going to win all 14, but today, he crashed. So he was super strong.
I'll add to this just because I'm such a car fanatic. Showing up to your race in a Lamborghini, that's so pimp. Van der Poel, he has a sponsorship, I think, with Lambo. Yeah, and he does. He rolls up to races in his own car. That's so badass.
When we went to Belgium to the race, my son, his goal was not pictures with the rider. He had those last year. Last year, he had this picture taken with Van der Poel, with Van Aert and Pidcock. So he had that already check. His goal was have a picture next to Van der Poel's Lamborghini. since that day, he came with a golden Lamborghini. He had his picture taken. So that was really cool.
That's very cool.
What's unique about this cross race is they basically do it right where the training camps are so they can get the best riders. They make it convenient for them. This was the World Championships, not technically, not on paper, but we won't see these guys racing together again for the rest of the year. I think Van der Poel's finishing off the season. He's probably going to win Worlds, but I think Van Aert's done, and I don't think we'll see Pidcock. Either they're focusing on the road. So this was really our only chance to see these guys pumping at full strength against each other.
Yeah, but you could say, okay, I don't agree completely with that, Spencer. It's not the World Championships because the course is not
but wasn't the Worlds just like this last year?
2 years.
It was like that fast course 2 years ago.
Yeah. But this was different. I mean, today's course, this course in Benidorm, Spencer. I mean, I was so impressed. I mean, these guys go so fast that they kind of fly out of the corners. They are pushed out of the corners because of the speed. I mean, this is not cyclocross. I mean, first of all, they have too much power. I mean, if you see those attacks on those uphill drags, it was crazy. But yeah, I mean, you're right. It was probably the only time we saw the three of them at their full power against each other. But the course didn't really, give enough it was tactical. It was fast. It was not a real cyclocross. The best guy won. So,
well, not to detract anything from Van der Poel, he for this incredible cross season, but is it safe to say that Pidcock and Van Aert had different objectives for this season compared to years past?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Van Aert has straight away said he doesn't do the Worlds. He wants to, compromise his, put it on a low level, his cross season, because he really wants to do something different and focus completely. His two big goals is Flanders and Roubaix, and I think that's ultimately what Van Aert is. He's already has such a palmarès that, he will be applauded or criticized for having won one of both or never having won. If in Belgium, for example, they're going to say, oh, Van Aert, great. But you know what? He's not that good because he didn't win Flanders or Roubaix. That's unfortunately, that's the pressure this guy has to deal with,
When he has to win like 3 or 4 of them, because if he wins each one time, like, that's not as good as Tom Boone. I don't know if he's that good, but the irony of this whole, I gotta stop saying irony. I've used it 15 times already in this podcast, but last year, Van Aert came in so hot to the cyclocross season, won everything, faded around this time last year. I kind of wonder if we're seeing the same thing with Van der Poel. He was unbelievable through the first, as you say, 10, 11 races. And then are we seeing, it's unclear to me who could even beat him if Pidcock and Van Aert aren't racing. So maybe he'll win out anyway.
Yeah, he will win the rest of them. Yeah. There's no point. Well, today Van Toornout was up there, but it's not the standard of a cyclocross. We're going to go back to the real cyclocross races. The World Championships may be completely different. It's in Czech Republic. It could be in the snow, or at least it will be frozen, which is different than today. Today is basically a criterium on in the dust, the cyclocross. And I mean, if you would look at the speeds, I haven't seen the average speed, but it was crazy how fast they were going.
It's probably why both Van der Poel and Van Aert crashed, probably because they're going so fast through those corners. Yeah. Did you hear the story about the guy who got second? How did you say his name? I'm in no world could I say this man's name. Just
Michael van Toornout.
So he flew. I guess he flew in.
He raced yesterday. He raced yesterday. Belgium. He won yesterday in Belgium.
Then he flew at 6 a.m. So he must have gotten up at like 4 a.m. and then got second. Almost won because he almost caught Van Aert after he crashed at the very end. So I guess he would be the only challenger, the only realistic challenger to Van der Poel the rest of the year.
Well, yeah. He's not going to challenge him in a hard cyclocross. No, I'm not worried about Van der
Poel. Until 8 p.m. or 8 a.m.
I'm not worried about Van der Poel. He looked strong. Today was just a course where you couldn't make the difference. The speed was too high. I mean, if you see how close everybody else was, also, you have a guy like, for example, the French champion Clément Venturini, who is nowhere in the real cyclocross races. He was up there until half a lap to go. So.
This is the most Belgian opinion ever. Not a real cyclocross race, because there wasn't 5 inches of mud on the course.
True. Hey, great show, guys. Thank you, Johan and Spencer. Only you two could spend an hour on the Tour Down Under and make it entertaining. And I got to commend you guys for saying Visma Lisa bike and not
Visma Lisa bike. It's going to take a while, but
it is.
Yeah.
But impressive. We'll be back together with the whole crew, Lance and George as well, for our up and comer show. This has become a very, very popular show. Johan gives us his up-and-comer picks, the names to look for in the future, and has been so spot on with that. It made for a much more entertaining season for me personally last year, watching for these names after Johan identified them. So that'll be our next get-together, and the UAE Tour is right around the corner. So Johan, Spencer, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks for having me.